Okay. All right. Hey, can everyone hear me? All right, we are gonna start our programming. So, welcome everyone to Pratt, and welcome to New York City Jewelry Week 2023. Woo! I'm Patricia Medea. I am the jewelry program coordinator here at Pratt, and I am so excited to be kicking off New York City Jewelry Week here at Pratt. I want to, this programming, it takes so much effort and so many people to make this happen. And I have lots of thank yous, but I'm not going to put you through that. But I am going to say, I do want to say thank you to the Fine Arts Department, and that's my department. And we have our chair here, Jane South. She's in the back. Hey, Jane. All of our faculty that are here, our students, and all of our amazing guests. I also want to thank the library, they just go above and beyond with the show install, working with Helen and myself to put this amazing exhibition together. We're thrilled to have Helen Britton here at Pratt in this archival exhibition. And I also want to send a big thank you to the Rotasa Foundation, Rotasa Fund, for supporting this exhibition and supporting Helen coming here to Pratt to do this. So thank you to Rotasa. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sienna Patty to give you a broader introduction for Helen. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Pat. I don't get to Brooklyn a lot, and everybody kind of laughs because I went to NYU, and so we didn't go to Brooklyn. But my parents met here, actually, at Pratt, so it kind of has a special place for me. As I was getting ready to pack up and organize a bunch of the different projects that I'm doing here in New York for Jewelry Week, I've been thinking a little bit about kind of the why of it all. So with the hope of centering myself, I did a little bit of reading. I was Googling. It's reading. That's what we call reading now. And I was thinking about art and war. Not surprisingly, the most profound words on this have come from artists themselves: Maya Angelou, Henry Moore, Frida Kahlo, Picasso, Doris Salcedo. I actually had a great time reading what a lot of these people had to say. It was the words of writer Margot Jefferson that struck me the most. The reason you need art in wartime is because, quote, history cannot exist without the discipline of imagination. Through art, we establish similarities between the past and the future, near and the far, the abstract and the concrete, casting received certainties into doubt, often. We look and we listen in a way that lets thinking and feeling run parallel, and at extreme times, this sort of cultural appreciation can rise from an analytical to a moral plane. If we pay close attention, and a task which is made harder every single day by our devices, which now is not working, art and literature and music can endow us with improved faculties to see our new present as something more than a stream of words and images. They can, says Jefferson, provide ways of seeing and ordering the world, not just our world, but those worlds elsewhere that we know so little of. And artists provide us with the map. I have the distinct pleasure today of introducing Helen Britton, an artist I admire and respect, and who I've had the opportunity to work with for more than a decade. Helen's work defies traditional artistic categorizations, and as you will see, it encompasses jewelry, sculpture, painting, drawing, installation, and more. Helen received her diploma from the Academy of Fine Arts in Munich, where she now lives and works. She has exhibited her work internationally, received numerous awards, including the Herbert Hoffman Prize, among others, and just a few weeks ago, she was honored to be named a Living Treasure, Master of Australian Craft. Over her 30-year career, Britton has had solo exhibitions in museums around the world, as well as multiple residencies, including one at Villa Bengal in Idar-Oberstein, which was the basis for the 2021 documentary Hunter from Elsewhere, and her most recent one, working in porcelain at Limoges. Her work is in Munich's I had fun looking at this list, I have to say. Pinakothek de Moderne, the Hermitage, LACMA, Australia's National Gallery, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the Powerhouse in Sydney, New York's Museum of Arts and Design, the Met, MFA Boston, MFA Houston, and the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, among others. An autodidact, Britton describes her creative process as enigmatic, even to herself. She intuits that the work must be brought into existence. Her choice of materials and artistic form depends on the theme, with the completed work possessing the power and autonomy to exist in the world independently. This creative process forms the crux of her artistic journey. Helen is searching for a way to order and understand the world around her, creating an imaginary circus of form, color, and story to help put the everyday into context, to imbue meaning in a world that sometimes seems at a loss for it. The purpose of art is washing the dust of daily life off of our souls, said Picasso. I paint flowers so that they will not die, said Frida Kahlo. And as Helen's words and images will prove, and Maya Angelou said, you can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. Please welcome Helen Britton.
Okay, wow, that was the best introduction anybody's ever given to me. So thank you, Sienna. Thank you very much. That was really lovely. So, it's an incredible pleasure to be here. Thank you all for taking time this evening to come and listen to me speak. Can you hear me if I speak like this? Okay, what about that? Is that better? Is that good up the back? Okay, it's good to have those things sorted before we get going. I would very much like to thank Pat. It's been a great pleasure to do the install with the fantastic team. Also Chris, I felt very comfortable while I was very jet lagged putting up my exhibition here, so thank you very much. And it's a great pleasure to be here at Jewelry Week. I'd particularly like to thank also Brooklyn Metalworks, Brian and Erin, who are hosting me. That makes it also very lovely. Of course, Sienna Paddy, my gallerist, and the wonderful New York City Jewelry Week team, Bila and JB, amazing, all the stuff they do. So thank you to all of those people. Probably forgetting somebody, but it's only because I'm a little nervous. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my background, my recent projects, and a couple of bodies of work. About 35 minutes. I'll be speaking freely and reading several texts, and then I hope we might have a moment afterwards for some questions and discussion. So I grew up in Australia. Here I am on my favourite cow, Jersey the Guernsey, with my grandmother. It was a kind of paradise. I grew up with peripheral awareness that we were living on the unceded territories of the First Nations people of Australia, which is now become much more of an important issue in my life. Just gives you a little bit of an insight how my childhood looked. Very thankful to have that very close contact with a remarkable natural environment. I spent a lot of my youth building cars. I didn't have the luxury of the pronoun she, they at the time. I do now. This is what my studio looked like as a young person. So I'm repairing the head of a Mazda 1600 Capella while I'm simultaneously doing printmaking, textile works, drawings, and various other things. That's what my studio looks like today. I established a studio in 2002 with my dear friends, Yutaka Minagishi and David Bielander, and we've been locked in the same room for 22 years, which probably explains quite a bit. David Bielander, terrified by my work, is also not only my partner in my studio, but my partner in life. David and Yutaka have a fabulous band. They spend a lot of time sitting on my sofa playing their instruments. We've have the great fortune of having very dear friends who are good photographers, as they're also the poster for this whole shenanigans shows. But this is a poster we had made in 2017. We made a very interesting exhibition in Melbourne. We were invited to Melbourne to transport our crazy workshop into a space there, which is what we did. So we had all kinds of ephemera, our images of the studio, the music that David and Yutaka's band make, various objects, and even the toasted sandwiches that we regularly eat for lunch. In the evenings, there was on the front windows of the gallery, when it's night in Melbourne and daytime in Munich, there was film of us working away for the duration of the exhibition. So that was quite an interesting project. During the pandemic, I left Yutaka and David to their nonsense and moved into the cellar. So whilst we still share machines, I now have my own space, which is quite good because my work is often quite large and was taking over, and I already had part of the cellar space, so I thought it was time to take it on completely. And as you can see, I'm blissfully happy down there with all my crap. My work includes, of course, jewellery, which is probably what most of you are familiar with, but it doesn't really matter what you studied. I did come from a completely different background and slipped into the jewellery abyss at a late stage, but I do make a lot of large-scale drawings and paintings and sculptural work. I also collaborate on a come in, sit on the floor. Oh, look who it is. Come on, come on. No, it's not embarrassing. It's Rockstar entrance. Yay! You can't see a thing. You can't sit there. You go and sit over there. Okay. Hi, I've already thanked you and said nice things about you. We'll just keep going. So, so I collaborate. I've collaborated. This is Justine McKnight. She's Professor for Textiles and Fashion at Edith Cowan University, where we both studied, ran amok as young women, team taught together for many years and continued to collaborate. Our current project is approaching its 9th year of production. We're hoping to show the work, which will have been made over a period of 10 years in 2025. This is one of the 8 pieces we've been working on, called The Net of Time. We were gifted a bag of antique silk that dates pieces of clothing that were date between 1780 and 1820. And it happens that both of our families on the maternal side were sent to Australia in chains as convicts at that time, and we found we both share family names. So it was very interesting to have been given a bag of silk clothing that was being worn in Europe at exactly that time. These are the kinds of projects we then embark on. So we sent, it's a fairly large piece, we sent this backwards and forwards between Australia and Germany for 18 months and very slowly and carefully netted it together with silk thread. Netting is a process that's very close to both our families. Justine's grandmother was a fishing net repairer. Parts of my family are fishing families. And it's a technique we learned from Nalda Searles, who is very closely involved with the First Nations people of Australia, who also use a similar netting technique. So there are 8 major works that will be released in 2025. So those are the kinds of things that are going on parallel to making the jewellery that you're perhaps familiar with. 2016, I was invited by the Lawrence Wilson Gallery in Western Australia to make a complete retrospective for the International Festival in Perth. They gave me 400 square metres, their entire museum space, and we showed 250 works dating back to the late 1980s. Some views of the gallery space. So what I tend to do, because I wouldn't even say it's raining in my mind, there's a storm going on there at any one time. And over the years, I've found the best way for me to have some kind of control over what I'm doing is to break it up into stories. And those stories then become bodies of work that have their own discrete research. And that's kind of what we have here outside. We have different stories, different scenarios, different preoccupations. At the Lawrence Wilson, I could show quite the scope of the stories that I'd been making work about. Just some details of how the works are installed. You'll see this reflected in one of the cases here at Pratt. One of my large-scale drawings, this is probably about the length of this room. My stencil work, and also creeping around here to one of my installations, which is a ghost train, sponsored by Märklin, the model train makers, and I made a kind of completely immersive work which included jewellery, sculpture drawings and stencils, and on this particular piece are 2 trains which are actually dead eels, and they circle around your head as you go in there. Oh, we've got the fabulous problem. Oh, it's working here. Cool. It's not working. It's not on my screen. Sometimes it doesn't work, but it's working. So there you go. It's a bit like the subway here, really. Sometimes I have that kind of feeling. So that was fantastic. So, I'm really interested in immersive environments. I'm very particular, if I can be, about how I show my work. In a situation like this, where I had a lot of support and full control, I could make a complete experience for my audience, so that everything, I see it as one thing. I don't see it as, well, there's this and the display and the bits of jewellery. For me, it's one complete thing. It all belongs together. It all happens together in my mind as a concept, and then I try and do my best to work towards that. So more spooky jewellery included in that corner of the exhibition at the Lawrence Wilson. Spooky bracelets, stencils. It's also some work from very early in my practice, and so it was a beautiful experience to be able to show work going back that far. This the second time that I'd been asked to make a kind of small insight into my practice. I had made an exhibition at the new museum in Nuremberg. It wasn't quite so comprehensive. There wasn't quite as much space, and also it was more focused on my jewellery and drawings. I also make shell necklaces. I've made necklaces with shells since I was a small child. For the first time, we showed an extensive group of these necklaces at the Lawrence Wilson. I have about 40 of these works. I don't show them very often. It's a very private practice, perhaps there might be something happening where we show a couple of these again soon in Munich. I draw a lot. I have a very large costume jewellery collection of the most basic costume jewellery, so not high-end, but stuff you get out of chewing gum machines and things. I find that very interesting. I find the naivety of the forms extremely free. And over the years, I've made drawings of part of that collection, kind of studies, and that certainly has filters down into how I make my work. These are just some of these pieces. Some of them are here in the exhibition. Yeah. Sometimes my pieces are very complex. There are about 300 parts in this necklace, and in the end it looks like this. It's a kind of, it's like a miracle. I don't really know how I do it. I don't think about it too much. These particular necklaces happen every few years. I call them the junkyard necklaces, and I gather together all the leftovers that I didn't use in the previous years and turn them all into one necklace. And that's I find that a very, very nice feeling, to do that, to tidy up everything, to put everything together, to make sure I've used as much as possible, that I'm, not wasting resources. And that's really nice. So some pieces happen completely independently of anything else. I've done several residencies. Residencies are always interesting for me because they spark whole avalanches of possibility. And I think it was 2015 or 15, I think it was, I did a very interesting residency at Ida Oberstein and pursued my interest in stone. So what I'm going to do throughout the talk, I'm going to read 4 texts. I really enjoy writing, not only for myself, but for other artists. And I often write texts when I've finished all the work to try and understand what it is that I've done, both for myself and my audience. So I'm just going to read to you and flick through the slides. Sometimes it's also nice to take an opportunity. I'll flick through fairly slowly. You can also close your eyes and just listen to the text, or you can just look at the pictures. So this body of work that came out of that whole Ida Oberstein experience, or one of the bodies of work, the body of work that I'm showing this evening, is called Ephemeral Phenomena. Pictograms constructed in stone. They formed on my table almost by themselves. While sliding, the piles around animals and insects and flowers appeared, like watching clouds or reading tea leaves. What to do? As we consume our planet, deplete the quota of resources earlier and earlier each year is difficult to justify the production of even more things. All I can do is carefully use up what I already have. These stones were collected over my lifetime. Many surplus or seconds, cut by hands that can no longer be paid to do this kind of work, but in such masses that they still lie around in piles along the tide lines of human activity, these specific geographic locations resulting from trade shifts and economic failure. Some shapes are meticulously formed by remarkable craftspeople, thin and fragile and delicate, a contradiction to the materials they are made from. And some are cut so long ago in a world that no longer exists. I started to build gardens of stone. Gardens and animals, these fragile little lives, carefully made to last several hundred years, if not longer. Reminders of what we hold in our hands, a metaphor for our responsibility. Ask of everything. Where did you come from? Who made you? What were the circumstances of your production? What changed as a result of you being in my hand now? We have this video on the screen outside as well. This was kind of interesting because having made all of the pieces previously, I started to look even more closely at what I had, what actually was in my studio, and challenged myself to use up some of these difficult materials. This bag of stones I'd had since I was a child. I think somebody had given it to me. And it was really a question of what to do with these things. So I carefully sorted them into their colours and then made a very fine backing plates. It's also articulated, and turned it into a collier. And then I made a friend for that horse. And then we had the pandemic. I don't know how it was for you, but it was a pretty tough time. I also lost a couple of dear friends in that period. It was frightening. However, the terror, the horror of life, which kind of is just continuing unabated, did happen before then for me. And that was in the summer of 2019, when colossal fires destroyed a huge part of my country. It was very difficult to know what to do under those circumstances, and so I made a black garden. As I was making this work, the pandemic hit, and I'd been planning to show it with my Italian gallery, and I think what happened in Italy was also very, very difficult. And we made a decision, not knowing what was going to happen, that I would just continue working on the exhibition until we could show it. So I started with the dark garden, which then became a whole project, which I'm going to show you. In the end, Antonella produced a beautiful, comprehensive catalogue of that exhibition, which I've donated to the library here. It's also available from the gallery. So, the text I wrote for the initial work, which I'll show you a few slides of, is as follows. In the summer of 2019-2020, colossal fires destroyed 18.6 million hectares of Australia. 3 billion animals died. Lives were lost, often by those trying to fight the fire. Homes, properties, histories, all consumed by the forewarned consequence of the Eurocentric mismanagement of the land. The helplessness and grief I felt while watching this happen changed me and how I work. Wisdom's despair, knowing but not knowing what to do. Structures imposed by colonial and imperial regimes centuries ago have built the specificity of this moment again and again. Through a belief system that only gives power, autonomy, agency and rights to specific members of the living world. All the battles we were fighting in 2020, including these fires, are a consequence of this. So what is the work I need to make for myself, for the planet, for history? How do I trace this moment of absolute crisis for generations to come? What will be left? What will be my legacy? In the myths of civilization, a constant symbol is the garden, from Eden onwards to paradise, commodified in tourist advertising, palm trees, lemon trees, eucalyptus trees with koalas perched in their branches, and this animal will only exist in captivity by 2050. What drives us to yearn for a garden pure and do everything possible to ensure that such a place can only exist as an exclusive luxury for those who can afford it? The irony of this time for many of us is that we long for a space of human and natural harmony and are complicit in a system that is highly detrimental to the realization of that vision. Like the rapidly fading posters of the time of travels, I was writing this in a lockdown, a time suspended indefinitely, I thought. The chance of creating a sustainable garden on Earth is retreating into the smoky dust. So I can continue to work. We hope to open the exhibition in 2020. Of course, that didn't happen. And then we decided in the early summer of 2021, during a lockdown, to open an exhibition that nobody would be able to see. There was no point not doing it, and for Antonella Villanova and myself, it was probably the only thing to keep us sane by that stage. Antonella and her husband, Alessandro Bagnai, have a beautiful exhibition space in Tuscany. I was able to drive there with special permission with all my work, and we set up the gallery for ourselves and opened the exhibition. It included large-scale drawings. This drawing that's about the size of drawing painting that this piece is. Jewelry, cement sculpture, and paper objects. And again, this is for me, it's a complete work, including the furniture, everything I can possibly create some kind of atmosphere around, I will do that. Towards the end of the production of the exhibition, I did make a decision to make a second black garden and paint it with really bright colours as a kind of cathartic way of moving forward into some kind of hopeful possibility. And some of those works are here in the foyer for you to see. There are a lot of knives in the exhibition. This was both my rage and despair and the kind of violence of the craziness of the world, which was kind of nothing compared to what then happened afterwards. Large-scale paper objects, these are that's almost to scale. There they are, hanging in my studio. That was very interesting. I had worked in paper and card before, but this time I just kind of made them as if they were pieces of jewellery, so in a similar way, structural way to how I might construct a piece of jewellery, so that was really interesting. I started working in cement in about 2017. It was the specificity of the materials that interested me, and that's just crept its way into all of my exhibitions since then. Some of the objects from the exhibition in Italy, some of the very first objects I made, sculptures, some more recent pieces, which are about to be exhibited in Florence in January. I'm working a lot with Italian discarded porcelain flowers and cement. This is just a kind of us casting crazily one of the pieces, one of the early pieces. We don't have that many leaks anymore. But it's quite interesting. And just to give you a sense of then how they come out. So cement and glass, kind of oxymoron. Extremely fragile things in extremely robust things. Just in the studio. More recent pieces, the Koala Hotel was in an exhibition earlier this year at Gallery Funaki. The Koala Cabin was as well. So I got back from Italy. It was all still pretty strange, and I thought, what am I going to do? So I started painting animals, lots and lots of animals. And I didn't know how to continue. It was kind of, I didn't know what to do. So I was ranging around and did some research and started thinking about, existence and all of those things that you do. And I created a body of work called Plastic Animals. Now I'm going to read you 2 short paragraphs, and I'm not going to change the slide until the 3rd paragraph. So this might be an opportunity just to close your eyes and relax your shoulders, have a tiny little break, and listen to the text. Plastic Animals. In 1913, Germany alone imported 30 million litres of milk from as far away as New Zealand to make a new material. An experiment had resulted in a discovery, and this transport seemed reasonable at the time to add to the snowballing production of trinkets of every kind. No one asked the cows, of course, or thought about the consequences, breeding ruminants en masse, taking their milk to produce, among other things, buttons. What is it about materiality, these histories and consequences, this interactive relationship that we still, at this stage, must learn? I think of animals and how I imagine their forms. What does a whale look like, really? Or an eel? In a week of rage and despair at human insensitivity, I drew 130 animals, searching for the essence of their character, using a thick paintbrush and a visceral, broken pink gesso sauce to prohibit fiddly accuracy, only allowing the essential impression. As the next animal crashed into my stream of consciousness, I would quickly search for images and paint them directly without correction. It was alarming that so many were shown dead, this massive database of online imagery documenting everything humans see and do. Could I paint 30 million? One for each litre of milk? And so, next slide, the series, If You Could Feel Our Sadness, You Would Drown in Your Own Tears, started. Frames were sourced, some broken and derelict to be repaired and made precious with fine silver leaf. Every aspect of the material construction touched and cared for: the glass, the paper backing, the silver loop to attach them to the wall, a handmade nail. Parallel, I was searching for something else, direct and expressive, that I could work with as I work on paper, a drawing surface with a jewellery history. What would happen if these drawings were the new jewellery works? And I could find a material that carried a story in its atoms for me to layer on my own narrative. The Galilite was in the box for years, and then, of course, I remembered the milk, as precious as gold and perfect for making plastic animals. I had been gifted a box of Galilite, and I photocopied my drawings, glued them onto the Galilite and carved them out. And then I used silk and gold to finish the pieces. Plastic Animals was shown in Amsterdam, and then a new group of work from the Plastic Animals series was shown in Melbourne earlier this year. There are 2 Galilite horses here that have kind of come out of that research. So these are some of the more recent pieces. So, lots of things happened parallel. 2021, also, while I was in Italy installing the show, Eleanor was releasing her fabulous film that I do believe some of you have been lucky enough to see. She was releasing it online at some festival in Germany. Eleanor, with her fabulous doggy, followed me around the planet for 4 years. I told her not to do that. It would not work and no one would be interested, and she wouldn't make any money, the last of which is true. But people have been very interested in the film, and I'm very, very grateful to Eleanor and her persistence. It was not my idea, and it was quite stressful at times, and it's really as much about her as me. Great poster, again, the situation where I am very fortunate to have excellent friends who are photographers, and that's the marvellous Corinna Teresa Bricks, working on a recent portrait that you may be familiar with, and there she is, and her partner, Dirk Eisel, photographs all my work. So cheers to all those people, and Ellen Alvarez for being interested enough in being good companions and getting all that imagery out there. So my last we're almost done, folks. I just want to talk to you about my last project. In 2016, I had a conversation with Monica Brugger at a beer hall in Munich and told her about my collection of vignettes. As a small child, I was given these little pieces of porcelain from Limoges for birthdays and Christmases, which I found quite confusing. I didn't know what to do with them, but, you know, I knew about Limoges and porcelain. So I told her about my vignettes, and she said, "Helen, you must come and make a project." I didn't get there until 2022, but it was really worthwhile. I went to ENSA in Limoges, which is an excellent art school in the French outback, and I took my vignettes home. 50 years after they'd been given to me, I packed them up in a box and took them back to Limoges. I made paintings of them to begin with, and then slowly but surely made a delicate foray into the world of porcelain and porcelain painting. As always, I worked really hard and then made some great things, I thought, and then I wrote a text. So to finish up, I'm going to read you one last text and show you some images of that, my most recent project, which is still, it's very new work. I'm still trying to understand what happened, and I have no idea where it's going to go. I ended up calling the project The Long Shadow of Time. So I'm checking. I started with Palissy. I started with Palissy, although it started... I started with Palissy, although it all started long ago on the other side of the planet, at the edge of a swamp. Pools of frogs, reptiles and snails, not unlike these famous plates. I was given tiny porcelain objects, gifts stamped Limoges, France, with Fragonard transfers, weirdly dressed people to my child's eye, accustomed to living on the far edge of a European colony, dodging snakes on a regular basis. 50 years passed and I was in France. Late autumn, dark and cold, as the wind caused the trees to lash around my tiny wooden chalet, I read into the night about the master of faience, Bernard Palissy, and the Huguenots and the terrible wars of religion. What beasts we humans are, but even beasts are not as cruel. Humans at the time of starting this project were waging wars and persecutions that were in no way different to 16th century France. There is no doubt that these stories impact on how my work develops. The creative process, a conduit for experience, a way to reflect beyond words, a permeable phenomena, gathering and re-representing knowledge in ways that are often so mysterious, it's hard to know who makes the work in the end. Porcelain, translucent white, a metaphor for purity? Perhaps. As wet clay, this material is as soft and flexible as fabric. And after studying the French paintings of the mid-1700s, ribbons began to pour from my hands, these frivolous luxuries that fluttered on the clothes of the doomed privileged just before the French Revolution. The Huguenots were central to ribbon production, but I read this long after I'd made the ribbons. And parallel, the forests started to come alive. I was surrounded by trees. When I woke in the mornings, there they were, stern, present, usually dripping with rain, leafless, their great feet planted deep in the earth. Opening the door, I would inhale their breath, the power of their capacity to give us our life-giving draughts of oxygen. It was the trees then that became the martyrs, themselves killed en masse to fire the kilns to create the white gold. The rivers clogged with their bodies, transported by the natural flow of the water, their ash. What happened to that? I don't know. There were other trees when those gifts were given in that other world, trees that also no longer exist, torn down to make way for the suburbs and the shopping centres with all their glittering products to fill the multiplying houses. It was there, in one of those shopping centres, for mysterious reasons, these little vignettes, these little French porcelain trinkets had made their way around the planet and came into my possession and imagination. I brought them back to Limoges with their long shadows, and they opened a door for me to contemplate the nature of humanity. I did make a fun little, here they are. I had them in the forest, happy to be back at home. And just to finish off, I am of course here for not only to be here with you at Pratt, but I do have a very exciting exhibition opening tomorrow with my dear gallerist, wherever she is, Sienna Patty, who is wonderful and very exciting. I made an exhibition called Crazed Slobbering Monster, 10 New Works for America. I'll just read you that text, and then we're free to go. They came charging down the channel of creativity that got hooked into my brain at an early age. First the donkey, fringed in grass, and then the monster itself. Eyes all a mess and laughing hysterically at the absurdity of life. There were juicy things to borrow, a cornucopia of materials, puffy shapes with fluffy fringes. Funny works for tough times. The world is overwhelming. I bury myself in my creativity, sometimes pursuing specific connections to place, sometimes letting in my anger at the stupid, ignorant cruelty of my own species, but this time going deep into the unexplored territory of my mind, following impulses of works that I could only just sense but not imagine. I took myself to my limits as the world outside my cellar door darkened immeasurably. Despite this calming escape of creativity, I did not wonder that it was a crazed, slobbering monster that came raging out of the depths of my mind at this point in our history. Thank you very much.
So I think we might have some questions. Anyone have a question for Helen or comment? Thank you, Helen. That was amazing.
It's very kind.
Thank you for sharing your work with us.
Yeah.
Hi, Bella.
It's always tricky with questions. I guess people have questions, but it's always like horrifying to have to pop your question out immediately after a talk. There should be some kind of decorum where we all breathe deeply 4 or 5 times and somebody asks a technical question or something about the materials to break the ice and, you know.
Sure.
I'll ask a question. And
Okay.
Loud voice. So
Yeah, awesome.
All right, Jane.
So now you're in Munich, is that right?
I'm based in Munich. I have been there, locked in that room with those silly boys for 22 years.
Do you think that being away from the land of your making, in a way, has given you a whole different perspective? There's a lot of longing in your works. I'm curious as to whether not living where you grew up kind of...
I don't know. I mean, I guess I think, you know, I am kind of hypersensitive to everything that's going on around me all the time, so it has certainly changed who I am. I don't, but it's hard to know. I mean, I go home very regularly. I collaborate in Australia, but certainly, yeah, I mean, I come across certain histories or stories that fascinate me that aren't specific to my culture. They might have, yeah. So I guess so. I guess so. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know whether did that answer your question enough or.
Yes, and it's extraordinary work.
Oh, it's very kind. Thank you. It's a pleasure. My pleasure. Yes.
Hello, and thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Okay.
Hi, my name is Ramsey Cotter.
Hi.
I'm so honored to be here and listening to you speak, so thank you. I feel curious about, I feel like there was so much message around this idea of being so environmentally aware. And I'm curious, have you always been that way? And do you feel like the world is more receptive to that sort of narrative and message now? Or do you feel like they always have been?
Well, I live in a kind of bubble. You know, I think a lot of us do live in a bubble. We're often shocked when horrible things happen and we weren't expecting them, kind of because it's incomprehensible that can happen. I don't know. I guess, you know, environmental awareness has grown. You know, I grew up in a country that also had a completely different natural environment. That natural environment has been destroyed. You know, I've watched whole swathes of bushland and beaches and things just become, you know, grotesque holiday resorts and shopping centres. So there is a sense of, you know, the kind of level of destruction, the speed of destruction, even over my lifetime, is very, very apparent. And I do think there is more awareness now, simply because we are so very destructive and also unnecessarily. I don't know whether people are more receptive or less receptive. I think artists have very often addressed the question of human activity and its impact on everything around it again and again. So it's hard for me to know how different it is now than whenever. I don't know if is that kind of what you're asking me, or?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that was a beautiful, I guess I think what I really want to be, like, what I really want you to say is, yes, now is the time, use your voice. Like, people are listening.
Yes,
and
now is the time, use your voice.
We can make art and get people to listen, you know?
Yeah, look, I do think it is, and I think you always should do that. But, you know, I grew up in a country, you know, my mother was she was a unionist, she was a feminist. Her and her colleagues and friends, they changed working conditions for women by using their voice. And it's not like we need to use our voice now. People have used their voice again and again and again. We are part of a continuum of using our voice, and I think it's our responsibility as, you know, the luxurious lives that we here in this room lead, to use our voice and continue improving the possibilities for sharing this planet with everything, every living thing on it. And I think that's very, very important, but absolutely. I do think it is also important, there's a great deal of pressure to use your voice. And, you know, I'm an introvert. You know, I spend most of my time in my cellar by myself, and that's where I'm happiest. And, you know, I think you have to find your way. Some people are very good at getting out and socialising and getting things done and lobbying and stuff. It's not everybody's way. And I do think all different ways, even if they're quieter, are also very valuable. And that's important too. I do feel there is a great deal of pressure to position oneself and be, you know, posting stuff on Instagram about your current ideas about politics, even if you clearly have not really a very comprehensive idea of politics and stuff like that. I do think it is important to believe in the capacity of humanity to move forward in a positive way, even if it is very, very difficult at the moment. Yeah. Yeah? Will you take? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yes, my pleasure.
I'm very curious if you can come back to this inner discussion that you had, maybe.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm very curious if you can come back to the time that you said that very hard things happened, that I can think that they could put you off track, but you decided to continue to work on your exhibition and to continue work. And I'm very curious if it's possible, if you can come back to this and to this time and unfold your inner conversation with yourself. What happened there that brought you to continue?
Oh, look, it's always been my refuge. Creativity is my refuge. I retreat into creativity all the time. So, you know, I was very, very thankful for that. And it is, you know, it's a very, you know, my studio is a sanctuary, and I can go in there and just lose days experimenting, trying things out and trying to find a way to also move forward. You know, it would be easy to make the same thing over and over again, probably be quite lucrative, but I'm not capable of doing that because I get quite bored if I do that. It's difficult to make a second earring. But yeah, so I do retreat into my practice and try and find a way to use my art to formulate what it is that I'm experiencing. It's not everybody's way, but I'm very thankful that it was, you know, I've done that since I was a small child. And that was just, you know, fortunate, I guess. So, yeah. Probably not that I'm just aware. How are we going for time? Is someone keeping a bit of an eye?
We have one more question.
We have, yeah, sure.
Do one more question and then...
I'm happy, but I just don't, I know you've got other stuff on, so I don't want to keep everybody here because, you know.
So after this one.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, thank you for sharing your process and thoughts with us. I wanted to piggyback on the question about the environment and something you said earlier. And, you know, we live in this moment of peak stuff where everything is so accessible and people have too much of everything. And you had said something about how you continue making in this time. And I just wanted you to maybe expand on how you square that circle a little bit, because I think a lot of us are struggling with that as makers. Is how do you combine the passion of making with a time when people maybe don't need anything?
Yeah, I guess it's what kind of things you think people, you know, what's going to be better. Is it if you're a sensitive, educated, talented creative? Do you think that you stopping making your fantastically beautiful handmade screen printed t-shirts is going to be better than just keeping mass producing them and buying them at some cheapo store? Because that's what's going to happen. What can we offer as well, I'd rather, you know, just have one new t-shirt each year instead of going and paying $2 for 20 of them. So I think that's also very, very important because it is a quandary. You know, why do we keep making things? I mean, there's heaps of stuff out there. But I don't think I think there's a limited logic to that. That it's also, of course, it's important and I'm not remotely interested in greenwashing anything about what I'm saying. But, you know, about my production of work. But it is also, it would be terrible to say, well, just don't make anything anymore, particularly us here. If we stop, that's not going to stop all this other stuff being made. You know, I think it's very important to slowly get people to understand to have less of more things that are made more carefully and in a more considered way and be happy with those rather than have the kind of mass production of stuff. I mean, that's very, very idealistic and tricky to know how to manage that. And being spoken from a position of somebody who can afford to spend $50 on a t-shirt rather than not only being able to spend $2 on a t-shirt too. I mean, all of those things come into play. But one does hear that, oh, but I can't make anything anymore because I've got all this, you know. I don't think that's right. Just that was a bit jumbled. I think, I'm sorry. I was only so excited because my dear friend Helen Britton entered the room with Barbara Paris Gifford and I got distracted. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought. But welcome. Yeah. Was that kind of somehow comprehensible?
Thank you. I just
Yeah. Yeah. Do we have one last question? Is anyone burning and itching and desperate to There's one last opportunity to have a question. Yeah.
Hi. You experiment with so many mediums and there's so many ways you express yourself. It's so wonderful to see. As a young person and creator, in many conversations, even with peers, there's people that have been saying that maybe there's a moment that someone should pick one medium and concentrate only on that one and let the others fall a bit or forget about the others. And I wonder, what do you think about that? Because you experiment so much, and it's very inspiring to see that in your process.
Yeah, well, I don't really have any choice. It just kind of happens. And, I mean, you have to wonder what, you know, you look at history or you look at certain other artists and they make all kinds of stuff. And then, so why? Why should it be important that a young artist only makes one kind of thing? It's very good for branding. It's very easy for a gallery to sell that stuff because people recognize it and they want that. So that's kind of also a reason why, you know, artists get tailored into making one thing. On the other hand side, it is very important to explore things really thoroughly beyond that first point of resistance, where it starts to get difficult. You know, you can kind of try and make something for a while and it's okay, but it's not really good, and then you really have to go into that. You have to spend time trying to get it to work. And often people go, oh, I'll just make it in another material. So, you know, you have to navigate those things carefully and think about all those external factors. But at the end, it's my job as an artist to make the work I want to make, regardless of anything that's happening anywhere else around me. And I take that very seriously. I mean, it's a difficult path, and that is my luxury, to make what I want to make with whatever I want to use. And I make it first and foremost for myself, and then it kind of moves out in the world. So I would just be fearless. The most important thing is to be fearless in your studio, and don't share it too much with people until you're ready. You know, use whatever you want.
I think that was such a great question and a great question to end on. So let me thank everyone. Let me thank everyone. Let me thank everyone for being here tonight. And also, Helen, thank you for this amazing, amazing presentation and conversation. Thank you all for being here. Please join us for the second half of our event over at Steuben Gallery, which is actually, if you come out the front of the library, right diagonal across the campus, you'll see signs. Just follow the crowd. And join us for the reception and our 9 other exhibitions in the gallery for you to enjoy and celebrate New York City Jewelry Week with us.
Okay.